20-30 minutes will be a continuation of the Q&A of the debate this morning, and I personally have to make an apology. The person who thought about this debate and created all the hard work was Hassan, but unfortunately he couldn't be here because of family reasons. So thank you so much, Hassan, for bringing us this amazing format. So what we will do is we will first start to address the questions that were raised, and we can make it more interactive now because we can just move this one microphone with the handheld together. So if you want to basically comment, that's perfectly fine. Just raise your hand, or online, just let us know, and then we will give you the mic. So maybe we just start with the first question from Ken Kudiger. If there's too much attention on increasing accuracy in prediction and not enough on the design of the educational context and the human design decisions process that makes use of output. Oh, is there? I was wondering, there's a word missing, but it's in my head that it's missing. So we now don't have to play roles anymore, we can just be ourselves, but if you want to continue playing a role, that's also perfectly fine. So let's give first whoever wants to start.
I want to answer that question because I think the answer is definitely yes. So one of the things that we've been doing in tutoring systems is you create an algorithm that makes a prediction and at different levels, and you create another algorithm that might drive feedback. One of the things that I've experienced is that the hardest part in this process is the development of the feedback. It's the pedagogical interaction with the learner. The algorithms are fun, right? And we've gained so much power in how we are able to create more and more accurate models, more and more precise models, etc. But that's not really where the effects are. The effects are in how you use them and the kinds of feedback that you do, and that's a very complex and growing area of research.
Yeah. I can chip in, although I agree with what's hard.
Yeah.
I think, we discovered certain issues with respect to the alignment or the predictive models and the learning design and how we are designing types of things. But what we don't do much, and I was also chatting with somebody in the audience in the break as well, is that whatever we do, whether we are talking about predictive or even descriptive models, what do we do with our practice? How do we change that practice? And then how we are then seeing how our predictive models are changing our learning designs. I think it's a really important thing that should be done in the future research, but it's not done sufficiently. I know that Bart and Thea to a certain extent addressed some of these models with the ideas of learning design, but it was mostly also still in the level of what kind of activities or from the learning design, but not in terms of that translation. We also did some work in Australia as well, led by Shane Dawson and Gregor Kennedy from the University of South Australia and the University of Melbourne. And 2016 we had a paper that Anisha Bakaria led here as well, that talked about different types of analytics that are needed to be incorporated to inform educational design. I think that should be our core business, but we are insufficiently in doing that, and I hope we will be doing it. Anybody else wants to?
Next question.
So just to wait.
Sorry.
The talking. Yeah. The talking sticks so people hear and people at home can hear. This question says, how to distinguish more clearly whether we support students in learning or make them too dependent on teachers and support from the outside. So, would you like to jump in?
Sure. I don't have an answer for this, honestly, but
But you have the mic.
I have some thoughts. Which is, I think it's a great question, and I think part of it is what we're focused on predicting in the first place. And so, there's a lot of cool work, and I think Phil Winnie is here, and looking at the process that we're measuring in the first place, or the process of learning and what we're doing there to support that. So rather than, the work that that we're doing to think about outcomes is great, but I think thinking about the process and building self-regulated learners and independence and problem solver answers and things like that have a high likelihood of generalizing outside of the classroom. So I think all of the cool work at LAC on affect and self-regulation and things like that are, I think, sort of addressing this. I mean, it's not fully functional yet, but I think there's a lot of cool people doing both sides, which I think is important to keep doing.
And actually, I would like to add that not all learners want to be self-regulated. There are learners that require the support and scaffolding throughout the process of learning. So it's a matter of understanding what is needed for which of our students.
Yeah.
Of course, it's great if all of them become self-regulated, but then maybe we don't need any teachers, which, I don't know, it's just a thought.
Do I go? Do you want to go? Okay. We were doing switching TV hosts format, so now, okay. Moving to the next question, a question from John Kennedy. It says, is the real problem not predictive learning analytics per se, but how people or other actors is it in response to the predictive learning analytics? What should we do to ensure predictive learning analytics feedback is safe? So, do you want to jump in?
Yeah.
Or
does someone else?
Go ahead, you seem fine.
Okay. Yeah, well, actually, the success or failure of those systems lies on whether someone acts on the data. Otherwise, it's just a data set there or just some sort of data information. And I do think that we should be doing more about figuring out how teachers or other policymakers, I don't know, involved in this field could do, what they could do and how to better support the students. I mean, even at the OU, we see various ways of teachers responding to those predictive models, and we would like in the future to understand and examine what are the ultimate ways of talking to students, for example, what language to say to show them that I'm not labeling you, but I'm here to help you to succeed. So I do think that's a key area in predictive analytics.
Yeah, I like to add there. I mean, as I prepared for this debate, I prepared also for the positive argument. So Jekyll and Dr. Hyde, yeah? So, I mean, predictive models should be part of a socio-technical system. And we have to basically have the whole other social type of structures that are actually defining the way how predictive models are used. When I was with the University of Edinburgh, we had a policy where we said 2 or 3 points. The first point was that learning analytics and the data used in learning analytics never present the reality. It's just a representation and a conversation starter in many cases. That was one. The other one was basically the response to do no harm, that no decision about learners can automatically be done. Major decision about students be automatically done by the predictive analytics. Third point was also that staff assessment should not be done with the use of learning analytics unless further consultation is engaged. And we also even had that basically we saw the predictive analytics as an opportunity for us to detect bias, so that we can then take the action based on the biases identified, rather than to use necessarily predictive model to do some of these things. So I think we need to have these safeguards around the predictive models that are actually then preventing the things like teacher being fired, etc. So if institution starts doing some of these things, that's really essential. With respect to the safety for the learner as well, I think Thea made really some important arguments about human-centered design. We don't do really much of that. Or sufficiently. We started doing that recently. Simon started that work as well. They had their important special issue 4 years ago in JLA. But we really need to continue. But it's a very complex process as well, because it's a confluence of human-centered design with the learning sciences, because it's not just what learners want as well, because we know that also from the literature. And yet we need to think about the data. So those are really kind of really tricky things. And the final point that I want to say is, and that was the argument Danielle was talking in the debate as well, and I agreed on that point, that Google is having lots of data, but we somehow feel in learning analytics that we are resigned from the pushing back on the quality of the improvement of the data collection. We somehow think that that's outsourced to the producers of the learning management systems. How many vendors of LMSs are in the room? Or were today? Thank you. But how much of that is actually pushed back? We don't have really good quality data that is collected by the LMS, by any means. I think we need to improve radically. We need to go, in 15 years we made no almost progress on that point. We are still stuck with the old same logs. How we get to the next point? We do some learning analytics in terms of multimodal, etc. There are some exemplary work, but how do we scale that up, some of these things that we are actually having with the types of things? And that would also potentially then help us better understand the learner and then build the structures around that to support it.
Maybe to open up the debate as well, because I'm mindful the online group is slightly smaller, so it's also nice to bring in the audience that is here. Is there anyone who would like to respond to what has been said before we move on to the next question? Simon? You have to hold both.
So a predictive model assumes a stable world. A predictive model assumes a stable world, that the past can reliably predict the future. Right? We train it on the past, and we assume that everything's staying stable, so we can say something meaningful. The world is not very stable. Higher education needs to change radically. Pedagogies need to change. The way that we use technology needs to change. We do not want our teachers to resist innovation because it will break the predictive model, right? They should be actively revising what they do every semester, continually learning. Now, we know that's not the reality, and that some things stay stable for years and years and years. And that is almost like the fertile ground for predictive models. But then they're acting as a brake on the radical innovation we need in higher ed. I wonder if you have any thoughts about that.
Thank you. Anyone?
Sure. I mean, I think that's a great point, and as Dragan mentioned, we prepared for the positive side for the days leading up to the debate, or the opposite side.
We would be equally passionate, if not even more passionate.
and I think that's like such a great point, and that's one of the things that we were kind of thinking through on both sides is how do we, and I think to Dragan's point about continually updating the data that we have, so you know, the model is only as good as the data that's going into it. And so Danielle made some really great points about trying to kind of mirror the human processing system, and it does really well because we have this like predictive, you know, processing kind of thing. We're constantly updating predictions at every single second. So I think, you know, moving towards a model where we're incorporating better data to update those predictions, and when a teacher does make this innovative, great plan, right, like how do we incorporate that in our model and not think of that as the deviant case? How do we bring that in and say, yes, we can shift now more towards that. It was a prediction error, but now we want to recalibrate towards that.
Absolutely. Danielle, go ahead.
I want to combine this with Ken's question as well, because one of the things I learned very early on in creating a feedback system is that less is often better. It's the task that matters. It's designing tasks that provide more learning opportunities with feedback and that meet the needs of the student. And the predictive analytics sometimes don't need to be that complex in order to drive a response that will enable the student to react and build on their knowledge. I think that's it.
That's it? Yeah.
Yeah.
Just add one more. Yeah. So, Simon, terrific. One of the things also we often see design of the innovation or learning, separate from the predictive modeling. I think they should be combined. We should basically proactively thinking about how I can benefit in my design from the predictive model. I remember some of your early writings in learning analytics where you said our data are our pedagogy. in a way. And I think our predictive models should be also part of our pedagogy. So in a way, you are proactively thinking, okay, if I'm designing a task, what Danielle is saying, okay, what kind of data can I get? Can I get the evidence that students are doing something, and how that can potentially be incorporated into the predictive model, and what is the role of the predictive model in my pedagogy? We somehow see these things completely separate. And usually due to a whole lot of organizational structures we have in higher education, I think in schools as well, predictive models are provided by some completely foreign entity that is like student support services. It's not embedded into your course design and anything, and then in a way it's seen almost like a big hammer of a rescue squad that is trying to support the students from the teachers that are actually supposed to be supporting them most of the time.
I just remembered what I was going to say. One of the things I want to point out is one of the inferences one could make from Ken's comment was that when we are building very accurate and very precise algorithms, they often don't generalize, and they are often more fragile. And so, and when context changes, then they don't work anymore. And so what we need to work toward is testing models across multiple populations, multiple contexts, and replicating models, figuring out when you need a completely different model. And when you do need a different model, then you build in feedback and tasks that are less fragile, less dependent on precise feedback. So general feedback is often less in the face of the learner and can push the learner forward and be less fragile.
Maybe just one minor addition.
Okay, that's going to be the final remark. We give it time.
Very quick. Since we are talking about learners, we should involve them in the process of designing those models. They should have a say as to what they want to see and how. And this is a way that's more likely to adapt them in the future.
There was an amazing question about a dashboard. Do we still want to do that? Or shall we leave it to this? It's up to you. You're the boss.
So we have time to take a last question, or not?
We can.
Oh, you want to take a question from the...
Yeah, let's do a question.
Okay, so is there any question from the audience? Oh, I see a hand. Okay. Oh, but this one as well.
Thanks. In a lot of the debate, we sometimes look at the predictive pipeline, and we sometimes criticize each step of the way, for example, the data collection, and then we think like, okay, can this data actually solve my question? And we see the whole pipeline, and we have different criticisms at different points. So I want to put you in a scenario where 30 years into the future, 40 years, we did a great job at data collection, we designed great tools, so we have a bunch of data, we have a bunch of things to collect from the learners, from the teacher, the design, everything. Now we have amazing models. They can generalize, they can do a lot of stuff. How should we guide the adoption of these predictive models? Assuming that the predictive models are amazing, they're great, can they still do harm? How do we guide the adoption? And how should we involve the teachers in how to use these amazing tools that we just designed? So assuming all the pipeline is amazing, how do we take care of this last part to make the predictive model not harmful and useful?
Well, I think it's all about the communication and the ways of working with teachers. And I will start off with my previous point and say that those processes should involve the end users, in our case teachers or students, right from the start, so their input into the project is implemented in a way while we are designing or improving those models. And then I think the communication point, it has to do with making sure they understand what we have and they can see the value of it, and also coming up with policies or approaches as to how exactly they should be using those models in order to limit or avoid any harm. So, I mean, from our experience, there is a lot of work to be done to ensure that the end users understand what you have, they see the value, and they actually want to use it in ways that can benefit the learner. And I think at least one thing we learned is that having them on board right from the start, even before you know what the predictive model looks like, it works really well in terms of them having a say, owning the innovation, and then going to their colleagues and say, look, it does work because I did it, because I was part of this team. Thank you.
Final comment? Because we're running over time.
When I first started in this game, the goal was to create a tool and that you envisioned, you dreamed of, and then you expect the teachers to use it. And that hasn't worked very well. I'm just started a new job as an executive director of a learning engineering institute, so I'm talking to more people like instructional designers at the university. Over the last 2 years, I've been learning more about learning tools at the university and how little we know about how they work, whether they work. It's all marketing, and the instructors don't know what they do, how they work, or anything. So like, if we're talking about a bunch of algorithms, predictive algorithms, even a bunch of tools, how do we match the learner, the teacher, to their needs, to their goals, what they need? It's almost as if saying that you would go to the grocery store and there would only be the one item because you built the best, you have the best cereal, but so that's the cereal you get. I don't eat cereal, but so that's a bad example. But the point is that what we need to move toward is better communication about what the tools do and matching needs to the instructors and the teachers and documenting their potential fallacies and their assets and what they can and can't do. There will never be a world where everything works perfectly because we are simulating human performance. Human performance is fallible. We have to expect noise. That's just the nature of human behavior and human interaction.
And the beauty.
What?
And the beauty of it.
And the beauty of it, yes.
Right, thank you very much.